control, Nicole. You usually do. So I've worked with you.
Trying to say. I already made one executive decision. I mean, I'll just take it.
Exactly. Well, I know that, and I see a couple folks, Ann and a couple folks that don't have your cameras on, that your real estate business is built on the relationship and the partners and affiliated businesses that you're in business with to serve your clients. And Texas National Title is one of our strong partners as we navigate this crazy market. And I can't think of a better title company to have an affiliated business relationship with as we navigate and do all the things that we do. They are always helpful. And even if, and this is what I love about them, even if you're not closing with them and you have questions, they still help you. That's because that's how committed they are to helping and being a partner with your transactions. So we love seeing everyone. And we thank you, Stacey, for taking time out of your day.
Of course, I'm happy to do this. And hi, everybody. So whenever you're ready for me to start, David, you just tell me.
Let's go ahead and jump in. It's 1:05. So if there's some stragglers, they'll just jump in when they come in.
Perfect. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
All right, guys. My name is Stacey Johnson. I work at the TNT Mira Vista branch, and we are happy. As David said, we are so happy to be partners with you guys. We are very thankful for you. So surveys are a pretty, serious matter when it comes to closings. And one of the things this tells you right here, we do a closer's corner every month. Our attorney actually writes this, and she is a real estate attorney. So it has some very informative information. If y'all are on here and you're not getting this closer's corner, definitely reach out to Tracy Blair and she'll get with me and we'll make sure that you see this every month. Every month is a different topic, and it's written for real estate agents for information. And I have a whole book of every one that we've ever done. So the first thing, guys, surveys, it says, what is important for a realtor to know? Surveys can look different, and I'll go through that in a minute and show you some examples. But why do we need a survey? First, the contract, unless it's marked that one's not required, the survey is required if the contract says it is. And lenders and title companies need it. So in your contract, it talks about survey coverage. We can't give a survey deletion to their title policy if we don't have a survey. We have to be able to review a survey. And the lender will want a survey as well, because we want to make sure that there aren't anything that could cause a issue to a buyer on their title policy. So I won't read everything. I don't want to bore y'all with it, but when you go through it, it'll tell you what is a survey, the reasons, and it'll talk to you about what we're looking for when we look at a survey. The second thing is, a big question is about this area and boundary coverage. What is it? So the area and boundary coverage is an additional endorsements that the buyers can get on their owner's title policy. And it's totally, the contract dictates who pays this for, but it gives them some additional coverages. So some of the examples that it, can cover, say there is a swimming pool that's been built and it's going into an easement, and that's still an active easement. There's coverages that say the city wants to come out and they have to do some work and there's some damage caused to the pool. Your buyer can have the additional survey coverage where they can go back to the title insurance that was issued, whoever the underwriter was, and those items may be covered to where the buyer is not out of any loss. It also covers if there is, say you have an encroachment with the neighbor driveway and your buyer gets in a dispute and it ends up being a legal dispute, your buyer could be covered under their owner's title policy, which gives them coverage where someone represents them and they're not having to go hire an attorney on their own. But this right here, it's really good to understand this. I would personally, I think if a buyer has a lot of questions about this area and boundary, because it's not black and white on exactly what it's covered. I definitely would recommend them calling the title company. And if there's certain questions they ask us that we can't answer, we would recommend that they talk to an attorney. But I have been in many, many closings with buyers where they're explained by an agent what this area and boundary coverage is, and it's not always been accurate. So I don't know if David would recommend this. I think it's very, very important that you don't say something that's not accurate, because the truth is none of us know for 100% sure what's going to be covered until the issue comes up. So us closers are also very careful about what we say about it, because it would be determined on a case by case what is covered or not. And then part of the other screen is deleting the area and boundary coverage. And this right here, we have in hard copy, and you can get this emailed to you. I've told agents, I think it's a good idea to carry something with you when you're representing a buyer, because it's a big question that I think is asked a whole lot, is what is the area and boundary coverage? So this information is always, we have it at our office, and we can get this information to you too. But there is an extra cost for it. And it totally is dependent on the contract, on who pays for that. So the next thing we have is called a survey checklist. We go through every survey, every title company, when they get a survey, before they can even review the survey, they need to have their title work in. So a lot of times we'll get a survey, an agent's just like, hey, can you accept this survey? Well, I can't answer that I can accept a survey, because what I'm looking for when I get the survey are several things, and a lot of them are listed on here. I'm looking first, I want to make sure that my legal description matches. I want to make sure the lot and the block are the same that's written on the contract and on my title work. I want to check, I check street addresses. I want to make sure that anything on our Schedule B, which Schedule B are the list, are the restrictions and the easements. So I want to check Schedule B to see if all the easements that are listed on my title commitment are also referenced on the survey. And then we're looking for then to see, are there any encroachments? Is there anything that's built over a property line into a neighbor's yard that could affect any of the boundary lines that could cause an issue for the buyer later down the road? So you see, there's no way for us to say yes until we actually look at the title work. So when it says miscellaneous, we're looking for utility lines sit out of the recorded easements. Are there any cemeteries or burial grounds? I know these sound crazy, but these are things we're looking for. Are there any park or recreational facilities? Is there any violations of the restrictive covenants? So we're looking for a lot of different things. I also want to make sure the surveyor seal is there. I want it to be dated, and I want there to be a certification. And you'll see in a second what I'm talking about looks like a survey, but they're not. And then we want to make sure in the next one, and this happens a whole lot, that we get this T47 and it literally has nothing written whether changes have been made or not. And that can cause a real problem. Let's say that we get to closing and I've been given an existing survey and this has not been filled out. And I think a lot of closers, when they get this and nothing's completed, will send back a email to the listing agent and say, hey, on the T47, no, nothing was inserted about changes. Can you please let us know if any changes have been made? And so if they say none, then we're counting on that. But let's say I get to closing and I'm sitting in a closing and we have another one of these signed at closing for our internal records. And I say to the seller, all right, well, I see on the T47 that you've already signed that there have been no changes made to the survey. And if they come back and go, no, we've added a room, we've added a pool, we added a sports court, that could definitely cause a closing to be stopped right there. Because depending on where that was built, how small of a backyard we have, I would have to stop closing. I would immediately ask the seller to draw it in. I would definitely go back to the lender and say, we have had improvements added to this survey that were not listed. It has. All of us have been in a closing before where this has definitely caused a closing to be stopped. So I would say this is very, very important that you fill this information out. And I listed down here, so many existing surveys are used right now. So if you know, if you're looking at a survey, if your seller has a survey and they used it and it was given to them from another closing, they need to list any improvements that are not shown on there. I mean, they could list, you know, pool added prior to, you know, our ownership. Because I think this is a real sticky area that if things aren't listed on there and if there's ever anybody that comes back and has to reference this, I think it's very important that anything that you have that is not on that survey that is changed to the you know, the layout of the land needs to be listed on the T47. But I mean, I'm going to go as high, guys. I mean, it's funny. I looked through 10 files today on this T47. Only 2 of my files had anything written in the T47. All the rest were blank. So I have no way to know that if any improvements were made to those surveys. So again, I think that's a really, really very important thing to make sure that sellers are filling out. And I think it's to protect them as well. Any questions on that?
We had a question. David was asking what is the cost of additional coverage on the title policy?
Good question. If it's so it's different. It's a 5% premium. If it's in like an LLC, not what we call non-residential, it can be 10%. It's based on the owner's title insurance premium. So an owner's title policy is based on the sales price. So let's just say you have a sales price of $700,000 and the owner's title policy is $5,000. It would be 5% of that premium of the $5,000. If it's residential. If it's non-residential, it goes up to 10%. And residential, and it sounds funny when we say non-residential and residential, it sounds like it's like whether it's land or not, but it also depends on if the buyer's name is in a like LLC corporation, that is considered non-residential in terms of how we issue the coverage. And that's just, and those rates are regulated by the Texas Department of Insurance. And if y'all ever need us to get, to tell y'all what that is, just let us know. We can always help you to figure out what the premium is. So a question that we get a lot, guys, is who pays for the survey? We totally go off what's in the contract. One thing that I do see, and it's pretty regular, number 1 says, within how many days after the effective date of this contract, seller shall furnish to buyer and the title companies seller's existing survey of the property and a residential real property affidavit. If seller fails to furnish an existing survey or affidavit within the time prescribed, seller shall obtain a new survey at seller's expense no later than 3 days prior to closing. So if I get a contract and there's no survey, which, you know, I ask right when I get a contract, if I don't have the survey, I reply right back and say, can you please forward the survey in the T47? You know, just so that I can say I accepted it, that I've requested it. If I don't get it, and I have this right now on a file, I didn't get it within the time that was prescribed, the buyer's agent sent me an email and said, can you please go ahead and order a survey? Well, because I didn't get it, that would be a seller expense. So I replied to the listing agent and I said, hey, the buyer's agent is requesting a survey. I just want to get the seller's authorization because it's per the contract, it's going to be a seller expense. And he goes, no, the buyer's going to pay for it. And I said, did you provide an existing survey to the buyer? We just didn't see a copy. And he goes, no, I didn't. There is not the seller can't find the existing survey. And I said, well, the contract says that if there wasn't an existing survey provided, it's a seller expense. And he goes, wow, I totally missed that. He goes, I was reading that part where it said, buyer's lender, buyer shall obtain a new survey and it was checked that it was the buyer's expense. But the only way it would have been a buyer's expense is if we were given the survey, an existing survey, and we didn't approve it, but there was no survey ever provided. So per the contract, which, you know, we're not party to the contract, but I'm just going off what it says, that it was going to be a seller expense. So that's something to just be aware of. if you've got a seller who doesn't have a survey and you don't think the seller wants to pay for a survey, it seems like you should just go ahead and check box number 2. And if a seller is having a hard time finding a survey, again, you may just want to check box number 2. So I made a copy of a few things, guys, that we've been provided, because things look like surveys, but they're not. And so what I was telling you earlier, what we're looking for on a survey, this right here, you can see it says a 10-acre tract, and it's got tracts next to it. This is what's called a plat map. So this is just a layout of the subdivision. This isn't one lot that I want to see. This is just the neighborhood. So sometimes we'll get this and people will say, hey, can you accept this? You can see this is not a seal of a surveyor. This says the state of Texas, because it was when this neighborhood was developed. This is just the developer getting all this information filed with the county. So there's no seal. Nothing was done on here that would lay out the one lot that we want to see, or the piece of land. So this would not be an acceptable for us, or should not be for any title company. We would not accept this to issue title insurance. And then this one right here is an unacceptable, because, and probably what happened on this, down here, I bet money that down here was the survey seal and everything. Hold on, I want to make sure I'm on the same one. Let me see, Alex Lane. I apologize, guys. It looks like one may have skipped in the middle. Let me just grab. No,
It might have been.
Okay. No, go back one more, Nicole. I see.
Let me go ahead and put it back to 2 pages, and then I think it should show up.
Sorry about that, guys. Yep, one more.
There we go.
Okay, now one more after that. There it is. So, yeah, the one here, guys, where it's not the drainage elevator, where it says no survey or seal. So you can see down at the bottom, I don't have anything down here that tells me a surveyor has actually done this. Now, I actually think this is a survey, but I think the bottom part of it got cut off so that we wouldn't be able to use this without that information. You see where Nicole's showing you? I have a feeling it was a longer one, but maybe when the copy was made, it got shrunk down or something and didn't have the information that we need on here to look at. Because it does, I mean, it tells me that it's lot 169. It shows me where all the easements are. I see the boundary lines. So I see a lot of the information I need, but it's missing a very important piece that we want to have to be accepted. And then the next one you see is called a drainage and elevation pattern. And these are often given to us because they really do look like a survey. I mean, but if you look here, it says finished floor. It doesn't say 1 story. It doesn't tell me anything. This isn't, the surveyor didn't go out to do a land survey. They're just doing something usually for the builder so that when they're building the home, they have the information they need to lay out their plans for probably for plumbing and stuff. But so this right here, when we get this, we're not going to accept this. And they always say it, a drainage and elevation certificate, it always listed on the top what that is. So even though you do see down here that it does have a survey seal and it has landmarked as a surveying company, it doesn't have the information that we need to issue the title insurance. And then we have the next one. This is a builder plan. So this is a builder drawing setting out where in this subdivision they're going to build the land. I mean, the lot lines are going to be right here. They're saying that this house is going to be on lot 19, block A, but there is no survey seal. And it says it on here. It's the plot plan and it's from Buffington Signature Homes. So it has nothing like this is just their drawing where they're going to have their building lines, where they're going to have their public utility easements. This is just for them. So when they're starting this neighborhood, they have a plot plan on where every one of the houses lie. So if we get this, we're also not going to accept this because this doesn't show me all of the, now the actual easements where they're at, where the actual house is located, where everything is finished. So this would be another item that we would not accept as a survey. Any questions on those, guys? I feel like I'm going fast. Y'all stop me if I'm going too fast so I can answer any questions. All right, so our next one.
That's
Go
the last
past
page I have, Stacey.
It stopped after that?
Yeah, I have 10 page. There was an earlier version that had 11. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I have the other one.
And if not, I can hold this up.
Okay.
So while you're looking at that, guys, so you can see here, I wrote acceptable on here. So this has everything I need. It has a seal from a surveyor. It has their stamp, their signature. I have my lot lines. The house is completed. It tells me that that it's, a 1-story house. It shows my driveway. It sets my building setback lines are on here. My easements are on here. Now, the reason a survey like this wouldn't be accepted is if when I get my title work, if I'm looking, say someone did build a pool and they build a pool in the back. Well, the first thing that we're all going to look at is I'm going to look, okay, I've got a 7.5-foot public utility easement running along the back of my property line. And they built a pool back here. I'm always going to want a seller to draw in that pool just so that I can make sure that if that pool, is there any chance it could go over that public utility easement? Because the seller is signing a sworn affidavit that pool is built where they're saying that it's built and that we're not having any kind of encroachment problems into a public utility easement. But let's say that this survey is given to me just like this. There's no improvements that would affect any of my property lines. This survey right here would be totally acceptable. So a lot of things come into consideration when we're looking at a survey, because when your buyer gets a survey, and if they're ever in any kind of dispute on boundary lines and everything, we want to make sure it's, as a title company, that we've provided the best information that we can so that that survey is as accurate, that they have all the information that they need. Because, I don't want to have a pool built here and then there's a sport court built here and then they built a barbecue area back here, because I'm going to look at that and go, how in the world did they fit all of those items in the back? And they're not going into the neighbors' yards on either side. They're not going into the back area. I'm going to be concerned about that. That's probably when I would say to the seller's agent, I'm not comfortable, or I would have our attorneys look at it and say, you're not comfortable with this survey. There's been way too many improvements in the back that we don't want to take a chance that we've got some boundary line issues. So those are decisions that a title company and their underwriter and their legal department decide on. So that one, and this one's a long one. So a lot of times what happens is the surveys are this size, but then what happens on like this, where I was telling y'all earlier, they get shrunk down and they cut off this. Well, this one got shrunk down, but they were able to make a copy with the information back here. So this information has everything I need back here, and it still shows my house. So a lot of times if your seller has a big copy, they just don't know how to shrink it down to get this. So it is very important that a title company sees all that information. So here's the same thing, guys. This was a survey that was totally fine. My legal description matched. I had the surveyor's signature, seal, and the legal down here was exactly what I needed to see. And then I wanted to show y'all one, guys, with a pool on it. So we have our house and we have our pool. Now our pool, you can see the dotted lines. It is encroaching into what's called a building setback line. We were still okay with this. Building setback lines are invisible lines. It's where the developer, they don't, they have to build their house. Like this one, all their houses are built back from the curb 20 feet. So, all the houses are in line. So you've got an invisible line right here, their building setback line, because that's how far this is from this period, so that the houses are all built, you're not have houses back and forth like this. So when I got this pool, even though there's an easement in the back, but it's over the building line, and the pool, it's the decking of the pool that is. This was not a concern to me. Because it now had this pool gone further out and say it just went a little out there past the fence, that would be a problem. Because what happens on those kind of things is you may have to get your neighbor the neighbor next door may have to join in to agreeing that they understand there's an encroachment into their property. Lenders have to join in on stuff like that. So surveys make a huge difference, because a loss on a survey like this, if it was built over an easement or over a neighbor's yard, and let's say this neighbor is not a pleasant neighbor and they want to get into a disagreement that ends up being in a lawsuit, and that pool has to get torn up. I mean, pools are not cheap, and those things can be very costly. So title companies, because we're not in the business to try to have losses, our job is to try to avoid us being any kind of a lawsuit and protect the buyers. We obviously want to make sure that these are things that we really look for. And with stuff like this, I mean, a lot of us closers, I know here at my office, we take yellow highlighters, we take pink highlighters, and we outline everything that we see that would be a problem or would be acceptable. So we go through them, literally every one of them, to make sure that we're not going to be in any danger for us and for the buyer and the seller, truthfully, because the sellers are just giving what's in their folder, their closing folder. If a new one's not done, they didn't, the seller, and me and David were talking about this earlier. You may have a survey that's been used 4 times. It may have been used by one seller to another, to another, to another. So a lot of these things, sellers may not even really realize any of these changes that are on here. And like in the back here, they built a shed. It says it's on a frame, and it is encroaching into the public utility easement. But that wasn't a concern of mine, because it's a shed. It's not on a concrete pad. So that if whoever services that utility easement, it doesn't say it on here, but let's just say that's the cable and the phone, whatever that is. Let's say they had to get out there and that had to be dug up, and the buyer does have survey coverage. That wasn't a concern. That would probably be something that we would end up having to absorb the cost of, either having it to be replaced. But that's just a chance that sometimes that we're willing to take on stuff like that. So that wouldn't be something that I would be concerned about. Guys, y'all have no questions for me?
I have a question. It's Mitzi Birdsong.
Hi, Missy.
So I've been doing, it seems like a lot of land and lots, and they're new developments, and all they have are plats. So none of the buyers, of course, all they have is the plat from the subdivision. They don't have surveys. So in most of the cases, we're telling the buyer they're going to have to purchase a survey, to go through the title. Now, we've had a couple of instances where we turned in the plat of the development, and the title company, it was a cash deal, and the only thing they wanted was the corners marked. So the buyer paid for that. So, right. I mean, is that okay to do also?
Sometimes. So it's really going to depend really and truthfully on the title company.
Okay.
With vacant land, yes, there are some times that we'd be willing to accept that on vacant land. I've never seen it done if there's a house. Vacant land is a little different.
Right.
And every title company uses different underwriters. But yes, I would say that is more likely to be acceptable when you are having a land, because if there's no improvements been made on that land, we can be more flexible about what we accept on that. It's really when you start adding any kind of improvements on a lot that is where there becomes problems. Now, let's say you have land, but it's a real big piece of land and there needs to be field notes. So the actual describes what the buyer is buying. So sometimes when it's a big piece of land and it's not like, it doesn't say you're buying lot 1, but you're buying 10 acres out of the Stacey Johnson land, there needs to be field notes that describe that 10 acres.
Right.
So sometimes land can be that where we'll have on our title commitment that we can't verify the land without a survey because it could be coming out of a big tract, and we need to make sure where our 10 acres is located.
Okay. Well, there's just one that's going through and it's like back and forth on if they need the survey done or just the corners marked. So I was just questioning. And like I said, we've had a couple go through with just the plat. So
Right, now does that one, is it a lot? Like, is it,
residential lot. It's an undeveloped residential lot, basically.
so it's already been designated with its own lot number? And
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
it always, guys, you can always ask your closer, which I hope is someone at TNT. You can always ask them, hey, we're going to be listing this lot. It's a vacant lot. Even we can look at a survey ahead of time. Like if somebody sends me a survey, I'll say to them, looking at this without comparing it to the title commitment, if everything matches, it looks okay. But if you're doing a vacant land and send it to us, I mean, we can still look at it. We're not opposed to trying to help you figure it out. But yes, land is a little different. Vacant land.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. And guys, sometimes the contract doesn't call for one. If there is not a lender that calls for one and it's a cash deal and it says no survey, we don't require a survey. We won't issue any title insurance with survey coverage. But if it does say no survey, it's weird, because I get that question sometimes like, well, we don't have a survey. Will you still insure it? We absolutely will insure it. We just are not going to give any additional coverage as far as any boundary coverage because we don't have a survey to look at. I don't know that I've really ever, not that I can think of offhand, ever had a file that has a lender would allow a closing without a survey. I don't think that that's ever happened in my career. Lenders want us to make sure that we are giving them a title policy and that we've looked at a survey, because that's a big deal to a lender. They want to make sure that their policy is covered. If there was any kind of, they have a loan on the house and they don't want their loan to be in jeopardy because of something that could be affected by the survey. Y'all are making it way too easy.
Questions? You're just so good that they don't have any questions.
That's not true. Y'all gotta have questions, but surveys are just tricky, guys, and we're always happy to help look at one because like I say, most of the time surveys are not a problem, but there are times I can tell you a quick story. A couple of years ago, I had a survey that the guy did have a sports court, a very expensive sports court, and he drew it on there. It was accepted. Well, come to find out the sports court did a lot encroach into the neighbor's yard. It became a huge, huge mess, both buyers and sellers in lawsuit. Well, the buyer did not get any additional coverage on the survey. So they were completely on their own about that. And it became a huge, huge, huge lawsuit. And that I think that seller ended up owing a whole lot of money. I think that sports court, if I remember, is like $125,000 sports court. And the next door neighbor ended up filing something against the new buyer when they came in because they were going to do something in their yard and had to get a survey done. And their survey showed that sports court had encroached into their yard. They didn't have fences. It was a big piece of land and it went way over into their yard and it became a really big deal. And the only reason that I was involved is because I had to provide information from my file to them. And so, that buyer and the new seller all were involved in something that probably could have just been easily resolved. First, maybe they had a new survey done when you see something that big and that expensive. Pools, sports courts, landscaping, those are minor, but when you're looking at additions to the home, sports courts, pools, things that really can cause, or that are expensive, that could cause you to be concerned if your buyer is looking at a house and you look at the survey. And I don't know how agents do this, but I guess if I was a buyer's agent and I was presented a survey, I would look at the survey and I'd say, oh, there's a pool in the backyard and it's not on this survey. I would want to have more information from the listing agent, like, hey, I see that there's been these additions in the back, but nothing's listed on the survey. I don't know if that's the time you want to say, or my buyer they would rather have a survey, or if you just want to, or we'd like to see it drawn in to where they're at, because it really does. It can cause a lot of problems. And it can stop a closing for sure. We've all had closing stop due to additions on a piece of land, because I can't let a closing go as soon as I'm sitting in a closing. I can't let a closing move forward knowing that all these changes have made to a survey and I wasn't told, because again, I'm putting us in liability to be involved in a lawsuit down the road if I don't find out what's going on.
So Stacey, I have another question, full of questions. A couple, going back to just a land, residential, unimproved lot. So the surveyors are all backed up right now. I'm getting quotes to like to the end of July, basically.
Right.
So one of them, because they need to get marked, the seller wants to get marked, so it's a clear, you know, whoever's looking at it can really tell what the boundaries are. So he recommended just doing like a boundaries and improvement marks on it. And then when the contract comes under play, then it would switch over to a land title.
Right.
Do you know how that works?
So this is what I think they're asking. So they're right now vacant land. And so I think they're just wanting to be able to move forward with the closing and just mark the lines.
Right.
Well, first, let me ask this, is it cash?
Well, it's not under contract yet. The seller, we really feel like it's got to get marked so people can see what the boundaries are first.
Exactly. So, and that makes sense. So they're saying to go ahead and move forward so that when that buyer comes out, they can see, okay, I own this through this. And then once you get it under contract, even though, and you are right, first about the surveyors are taking, I mean, they're very, very busy right now. But so they're saying to go ahead and use that to get it under contract and then to move forward with the full-fledged survey after that. That's when you're going to have a survey that's going to show any, there's probably usually on vacant land, unless, well, because you're in a subdivision, they could already have some lines that are running underneath. Like they could have already laid out their, you know, their public utility lines. So so they're saying, let's do that, go ahead and mark it, and then do the full blown survey to outline building setback lines, easements, anything else that runs on the land. Okay. Now, usually if you do have a buyer that comes along and there's a lender involved, that marking probably won't be acceptable. Usually you'll find more of those acceptable when someone's paying cash.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, I mean, lenders have, you know, their regulations on what, or rules on what they determine. Because I have lenders come back where I'll have accepted a survey with a drawn in pool, and the lender will come back and say, our underwriter does not want the pool drawn in. They want a brand new survey to be done. So all of us, you know, just because I can take it doesn't mean the lender can. And just because a lender can take it, a title company may not take it. But yeah, I would say, y'all, that is something to think about too. I would bet right now, I bet surveys on residential, I'm going to say residential lot and block taking 10 to 14 days.
Or longer.
You think longer? Okay, yeah. And
I've gotten quotes anywhere from, like I say, 10 to 20 days. And then one that I'm looking at, they're like at the end of July now.
Wow. Okay. That's good to know. But I know they are, I mean, we'll get asked to get quotes from people, which is no problem at all. Once we get quotes, I always say, can we get a quote for, and I'll give them the address, and please give turn times. Yeah. And so that is what I've been seeing. 10 to 14 was the earliest ones. Other ones have been, I won't even be able to look at it for the next couple of weeks. Well, you can't look at it in a couple of weeks. That's going to be hard for a closing.
Yeah.
But guys, we have a lot of people at TNT, a lot of people at this. We're always happy to help. If you have questions after this class, you can always reach out to us. We're always happy to help answer any questions we can.
I was like going to raise my hand. I was like, I have a question.
Pick me.
I was like, that's right, we're here. It's like when you wave bye to everybody at the end. I'm like, that's so silly. So I know you had mentioned people can write them in, and how important is it for you to have the seal on it to be able to like use an existing survey?
Very.
So that's pretty much like with the existing service, like that's kind of your deciding factor.
because it tells us that it is a certified blue line survey.
Okay.
So now, would I say a 100% sure that there's no way that it could be taken? No. I think that that is a case by case, but I would say that it's more rare to ever accept a survey without a seal. I would say that is something that most all underwriters at a title company want to see on a survey.
I'm gonna ask Nicole this as your broker, your real estate brain, and Tracy too. You're at a listing appointment and the client hands you a survey and says, "This is what I have." There's no seal, and you know that there's a pool, and there's not on the survey. How do you handle it with the seller in giving them advice as we go forward to closing? I'm curious.
I would set
It's
the
like-
expectation that they may have to pay for a new survey. Like I am somebody, when I sold real estate, that I always did a worst case scenario in a net sheet. And so I would probably already have built in the cost of a new survey into the net sheet. So it would just kind of be, not as big a deal
Right.
if we needed to do it.
I always said, I'm like, thanks for sharing, Nicole. It looks like the survey doesn't have the seal and the pool's not reflective on here. I would say that it's not a marketable survey because it's not reflective of a true footprint of the property currently. With that being said, we can offer it up and know that it may not be accepted. And I believe it is the buyer's, it's negotiable, but I think it's a buyer's responsibility to pay for the survey because their lender is going to require it. Or we don't mention it at all and we say we don't have a survey. So you tell me how you would like to handle it, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. So anyway, that's, I think, a way to address it, because I'm like, either that or you get really, really clear, because we've all bought surveys. I've missed a box. I've said we didn't even have one and I checked the wrong box and my client was with me and we bought surveys and it happens. But I was just curious in what's exactly, like, making sure that's kind of that threshold mark on a reusable or existing survey. So thanks, Stacey and Nicole, for playing.
Remember, guys, if your seller is like, oh, I can't find my survey, they can go back to who they closed with prior. And this is something that, is easy to do. Like if somebody calls us and says, hey, I closed with you 2 years ago and I can't find a copy of our survey, we just can pull it up and send it to them. So that's, if sellers are struggling, because, they're moving and so they've probably packed stuff, always suggest to them. And if they don't remember where they closed, we can pull the warranty deed up. All title companies have a number that we use when we record documents with the county. We can tell them where they closed and they can go right there.
I didn't think everybody kept the surveys though. I thought they did for a while and then I didn't think you kept them in your records anymore.
We do.
After a certain date.
7 years is what we're required to keep copies of stuff. So
Okay.
If they just happened the other day, the seller sent over a survey. It was another closing team. They sent over a survey. And unfortunately, this survey, which was not a survey at all, it got overlooked and it wasn't a survey. And come to closing, the lender's like, hey, this is, our underwriters looking, we can't take that. So, and we hate when this kind of stuff happens. I called the seller. I was helping another team. I called the seller. I said, hey, listen, I'm so sorry to do this to you. I found out where you closed at. Do you by chance have a copy of your closing documents? And she goes, I save everything. So she sent me all the PDFs she had. I went through them and I found the survey. What she was using was a drawing because she had bought the house from a builder. And that's what she sent over. And it did look like a survey. It looked like what I had shown y'all. And it went through everybody up until 2 days to close. Well, there would have been no way to close. So this was, you can imagine, stressed everybody out. But when she sent me all her closing documents, I found it.
They were in there.
Yep. And I
Okay.
said, bingo, we found it. This is the survey. So a lot of times they just don't know where they're at because, you know, I mean, they're busy. I mean, sellers are packing up stuff, but a title company, we're required to keep the documents for 7 years. But I'll tell you the truth, like ours go into an internal system, so they're never gone. I mean, we always have these copies. Back, you know, when we
Okay.
did file stuff electronically and you actually had to make a physical copy and get it, you may not, if you closed 20 years ago, yes, you may not be able to find your survey. But if it's within the last 10 years, I'd be very surprised if a title company
If they didn't have it. Okay,
electronic copy.
good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know. If they're in business, but that's why you do business with people that are in business for a really long time and knowledgeable and knowing solid title companies like Texas National Title.
I like that.
A great commercial. Paul, please note that in the chat box, I have dropped a copy of the PDF that Stacey went through, as well as Stacey and Tracy's contact info. So depending on if you need sales and marketing or if you need escrow, you can reach out to either of them. And then we will also have a copy of the recording available to you probably tomorrow. You can reach out to Tracy for that.
Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect.
All right. Any other questions before we let Stacey get on with her day?
I have a question.
Great.
Well, I have a cash buyer, and the cash buyer paid the title policy. I think this deal we closed with TNT, but you know, my buyer doesn't want to pay the survey, and then there's no existing survey. So at this point, you know, we already closed the deal. I'm just curious how important the survey is.
Well, so you had a cash buyer. Was this residential, like a lot and block, a home on it?
That's a residential home. You see,
Right. So did the buyer not want a survey just because he didn't want to pay for it? Is that really why he didn't want a survey?
yeah, seller doesn't have one, and they don't want to pay, and my seller doesn't want to pay. My buyer doesn't want to pay either.
Okay.
And
Well, I guess if it was me you were talking to, like if we were friends and I'm in the title business, I would want a survey. Because I'll give my house an example. I've owned my home for 17 years, and since I bought my home, I've added a whole outdoor kitchen area, a pool, a hot tub, decking. Now I live in Circle City, so the man is very, very much sticklers about what you do. And I had to get architectural committee approval. But if you live in a neighborhood that isn't managed by an HOA and you build stuff that nobody had to go out and check where your easements are, that you're building stuff in the places you're at. Me personally, I don't think I would buy a home without a survey, because I would want to see what has happened and could there be any problems with that. Believe it or not, there are homes that can be built over an easement. If you have a builder, you're more likely to have that from like a custom home builder than a spec builder, because they're all following, you know, in these big planned unit development homes. But if you had a custom builder build a home and maybe everything wasn't checked as to where it was supposed to be, we have had homes built smack over a public utility easement. Me personally, I would always want a survey. I don't think I'd ever close without a survey.
okay, so like you recommend, we're being the, you know, buyer's agent, we recommend them to order the survey if the seller doesn't want to pay. So, you know, we recommend buyer, you know, should pay that, right?
Well, and this is something you should ask your broker. Maybe your broker would recommend you saying to your buyer, just for your safety, you know, I recommend this as your agent, but, you know, obviously it's their decision. But, you know, I mean, just to know where your boundary lines are and to make sure there isn't a problem. I mean, I don't know. Like I say, it wouldn't be, I wouldn't close without one.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say it's certainly negotiable, and if you were doing a loan, they would require one, because they want to make sure that it meets everything and there's no surprises. As a cash buyer, it would protect you to have one, and I would strongly advise that you do it. While it is negotiable, the survey protects you, and so most buyers would buy it for that reason.
Okay. Yeah, I've closed 2 deals and the buyers doesn't want to pay the survey and they didn't pay and then they didn't order the survey. And yeah, hopefully.
So I would also go into, help me understand why you would not want to, because it's less than $700 to have protection for your property. What is it about is it the cost, or is it I'd kind of see what the objection is and move through that, because maybe they don't fully understand it, and that can be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
And remember, we have information that in some of this packet, if you want to, we can get you copies of that kind of tell people why a survey is important for them. So we can definitely send something to you if that would help you explain it more.
Thank you, Stacey.
Of course.
Awesome. Questions? Going once, going twice? Super. Stacey, you're always so informative and helpful. Thank you. And I
Glad to
know
do
that
it.
you guys couldn't do it without Nicole and Tracy, and we couldn't either. So we appreciate you guys so much, very much so. Y'all
Great.
write their names down, reach out to them. They are some of the best advocates for you in your transactions and as you go through your real estate career. Absolutely.
Great. Thanks, guys. Thank you, David, so much. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you,
Appreciate
Stacey.
you.
Good to see you in person. We've closed so many deals together. Thank
Oh,
you.
but we're-
Bye-bye.
We're opening back up. Y'all are welcome to attend your closings. We want y'all here.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Wave.
Smarty pants.
There's always one.
Always one.